Welcome to the DFL Breakdown, presented by GrizLeeGear, with your hosts, Lucas Ford and Ricky Epperson.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the DFL Breakdown, the #1 cartoon side character themed, league-specific, weekly fantasy football podcast in my basement.
That's right.
And we're back for another episode here. We had some incredible football this last week. We started off with an absolute bang from that Bengals-Ravens game, and it had a huge rippling effect on the rest of the matchups in the league this week, so that was really awesome to see out of a Thursday night game. It's Thursday, November 14th today. We have an Eagles versus Commanders game tonight. I'm hoping that one is just as electric. My co-host Ricky is in Ohio this week, so he's not here for the podcast, but we should get him back here sooner or later. I miss having him here, so hope to see him soon. But without further ado, we got a lot of matchups to talk about here, a lot of playoff implications coming up as we approach the end of the regular fantasy season. And yeah, I'm going to start straight off with, of course, our usual Game Breaker segment, but someone from that Bengals-Ravens game here. So let's stop dawdling and get right into it.
I'm coming! Here I come! Game Breaker.
All right, if you watched any football this week, you knew this was coming. Jamar Chase, 55.4 points for Nate, and he needed every single last bit of that here in this matchup. So it had to be Jamar Chase. There was no one else. He got 3 touchdowns in that game. I think it was over 250 yards on 11 receptions. Just a monster game. Even though they lost, they still lost to the Ravens, and Ricky got great numbers out of Lamar Jackson from it, as you can see. But yeah, it didn't end up mattering for the Bengals, but it mattered for Nate here. So Jamar Chase is the game breaker, and let's talk about exactly how much that meant to the Trump 2024 team in this week. Let's get to our score summary, and we can talk about it a little more.
Score summary.
Right, so yeah, this was a crazy matchup, and it went all the way down to the wire, but it started off early for Nate in this win here. He scored 150.9 points to Artie's 149.58. And there are a couple of huge takeaways from this one on Artie's just excruciating loss here. One of them being that Jamar Chase performance, 55 points, and you barely win by a point and a half. That's you'd think when you start your week with 55 points, you'd have it in the bag, but only 3 points out of Devonta Smith, 4 out of Jake Ferguson in that embarrassing loss to the Eagles. He flexed John Mechie, which I believe he picked up this week. You know what? I'm going with another no research
Waiver Warrior.
We're hitting it here. It's the John Mechie Waiver Warrior Game Breaker combo from Nate. Just incredible stuff here, and that really made the difference for him. It wasn't Chris Boswell or TJ Watt, who have been great for him this year, but not so much this game. It wasn't Kyron Williams. It wasn't Jared Goff. None of those guys really hit their projections. It was just Jamar Chase going nuclear and John Mechie coming in at the flex and scoring 18.4. Artie had a great week too. Like we said, 149.5 points. Nothing to be too upset about, except for the fact that you fired up Adam Thielen, who still hadn't been activated off the IR for the Panthers. And what's crazy to me is that this was a move that he made during the week. As you remember, we talked about Sterling Shepard being the waiver warrior last week. Obviously, when healthy, you would rather start Thielen here, but he didn't play. If you check your lineup before the game, you could have thrown Sterling Shepard in, or really anyone. You lose by 1.4 points here, 1.32 even. It's you could have got that out of just about any of the guys that played here. So rough loss there for Artie. They're just missing it by that much. Chuba Hubbard's been excellent and continues to produce for him. Almost 25 points there. Jonathan Taylor didn't have his best day, but still rushed for over 100 yards. And he even got production out of Mark Andrews, who's been impossible to decide when to start and when to sit so far this year. He managed to get it there, and 23 points out of the Eagles' defense in that rout of the Cowboys that I already mentioned. These were all great things for Artie here, and in almost any other matchup this week, he would have won, but had the unlucky prospects of going against Nate here. So rough 1-1 week for him. Nate taking home the 2-0, and they are, further separating themselves from each other in the standings here. Already staying pretty close to the bottom, and Nate getting closer to the top. Let's talk about the next matchup in our little list here, and that was the Dogs versus the Toaster Baths. Corey versus Lehman. Corey taking home a win here, but this was an exceptionally high median week, so he didn't manage to get the median with 132 points to Lehman's 120 flat. It was a pretty good performance regardless, though. It's not something you're upset about looking at it here. 21.5 points out of George Pickens, 16 points out of New England's defense, who he just picked up this week in that matchup against Chicago. There wasn't a lot of certainty going into it, but he felt like he knew that it was going to be better than that Bears defense that he was playing against. And even though Dallas had a terrible day, which I've talked about twice now, Micah Parsons still had a great performance for himself. 16 points there, 2 sacks, 2 QB hits, forced fumble. He was really doing a lot on that one. But only 7 points out of Xavier Legette, 7.5 out of DeAndre Swift, and Patrick Mahomes just right about at projection in that crazy last-minute win that they had, last second even, where they blocked the field goal that would have given the Broncos the victory. Lehman had good performance out of Chase Brown, who's been really taking over that Bengals backfield, especially since Zach Moss's season is over. Tyler Bass kicked him a couple good ones there, and Brian Branch has been just steady producing still for him, getting 17 points there. But other than those bright spots, it seems like everybody else missed their projections. Josh Allen and the Bills won that game against the Colts, and on paper you'd think it was somewhat convincingly, but they struggled. The Colts defense looked pretty good in some points there, and they picked off Josh Allen twice. It ended up being closer than they wanted it to be, and Josh Allen didn't score as many fantasy points because of it there. David Montgomery only 11.6. DeAndre Hopkins, a big step back from last week. On Lehman's bench, he's scoring 20 plus, but fires him up 9.6. Ain't that the way life goes in the world of fantasy football? Khalil Shakir have been incredibly consistent at that 11-point mark. Seems to hit that pretty frequently. If I'll look again here, 11 last week, 19 the week before, 13, 3, 10.2, 19.2, 10.6. So he's right there. I mean, that's just about what you expect from him. You're not looking at that and being like, "Oh, if only Khalil Shakir scored me a little more." I think you're all set with that there. CeeDee Lamb, on the other hand, though, 8.4. This is starting to look sad for the Cowboys, and Dak Prescott's season is confirmed to be over. His muscle has been ripped off the bone, so that's not conducive to good football playing, and he's going to decide to get that hamstring surgery instead there. CeeDee Lamb suffering because of it. No touchdowns in that game. He only got 6 receptions for 21 yards. They were completely shut down. And Lehman just takes home the 2 losses on that, moves to 9-11 on the scoreboard. Corey takes the 1-1, moves to 8-12. So he's pretty close to the middle with a lot of other teams here. We'll talk about it as we get closer to the standings, but a pretty decent win for the Dogs there. Definitely one they needed. Let's look at the AZ 69ers versus MHJ Peddler Dylan, the Marvin Harrison trade extraordinaire here. We're going to have to talk about that this week because there's been a bunch of stuff at the trade deadline, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Alex won this one convincingly, scoring 170.88 points. He was our top scorer on the week, and Dylan was pretty close to the bottom at 106.64. This was an absolute smackdown in favor of the 69ers and contributing to the slide of Dylan's team, who's been losing a lot more than they've been winning as of late, if I remember correctly here. I think he started off somewhat hot, but been cooling down. It wasn't in part to either of these guys' quarterbacks. Well, I guess Dylan could attribute his loss to Baker Mayfield's performance in part. 7.9 points out of him. Jaden Daniels, though, only 8.5, so it wasn't like there was a wide margin to make up there. It really was Bijan Robinson scoring almost 30, Calvin Ridley scoring 26, and Cortland Sutton scoring 19 for him. All these guys getting touchdowns. Bijan and Calvin both got 2 touchdowns. Cortland Sutton got a touchdown. Even his tight end Dallas Goedert got a touchdown. Puka Nacua got 9 receptions for 98 yards. And even his kickers kicking game winners, long ones, he had 2 50-yarders, so those are worth, 10 points each at the minimum. Just a big week for all of his guys. Brian Burns was great against the Panthers. That can be somewhat expected. Even though they lost, that was unexpected. For anyone who didn't know better and expect the Giants to lose at any time they have a glimmer of hope. The Chargers defense even did well for him. 11 points there. Just all around great play from his guys besides Daniels and Ramondre Stevenson, who didn't really do that well this week. Dylan, on the other hand, lots of disappointment to go around. We talked about Baker Mayfield being, under 8 points for him on the day. J.K. Dobbins, who's been good this year, only scored 8.5 for him. They only got 8.6 out of Jalen Waddle in a game that the Dolphins won. Kind of upset about him only getting 3 receptions if you're a Jalen Waddle holder. Dalton Kincaid got injured for him, only 2 receptions for 24 yards. Ricky Pearsall getting thrown out there, 17.3 points, looked good in that game, scored a touchdown, 73 yards and 4 receptions. It's pretty great for the rookie who just came back from the gunshot wound that he suffered in the offseason. And Quincy Williams, I can never tell which one it is from the small picture. It's Quincy on this one. Scoring him 15.5 was a positive, but yeah, it was negative for a lot of other people there. So tough stuff for Dylan. He takes the 0-2 on this one, moves to 7-13, and Alex takes the 2-0, moves to 9-11, like we discussed Lehman being at as well. So there's definitely been some significant mix-up in the standings. I keep alluding to it, and we'll get to it soon. Calm down, Lucas. We'll get there. All right, let's talk about Riley's team, George Droid, versus Mike's team, Herbert the Pervert. Mike getting the lowest score on the week, even though he had competition here. His 71-point performance out of him and 145.4 for Riley. He took home the 2-0 on this one, and Mike goes home with another 0-2. Jalen Hurts has been unstoppable the last 4 weeks, scoring more than anybody else in fantasy football in that span. Just crazy amounts of points constantly, and that's contributing heavily to these continual wins for George Droid here. Darnell Mooney has just been electric. He's sneakily the wide receiver 8. We were talking about it in the chat earlier in the week here. Just been consistent, some spike weeks, but nothing too disappointing, especially some guy, I think, Riley signifying by his nickname Waiver Guy that he picked him up off waivers this year. So, pretty good stuff for that there. But TJ Hawkinson coming in, 15.2 points. He's been looking great in his return. Josh Downs, 14.2. He got just a lot of great performances at a few key guys here. Wasn't a great day from Brandon Aubrey, only 2 field goals, and Denver's defense did lose that game like we talked about, only 5 points out of them, but everybody else did pretty darn good. The return of Christian McCaffrey was, I'm sure, a welcome sight for Riley. I'm sure he's probably in the top percentile of teams that drafted Christian McCaffrey at this point in the season. He's looking at now a 15-5 record after only having his number 1 pick for 1 game. He really hit on a lot of these other guys. Alvin Kamara, Jalen Hurts, been great for him. And getting Darnell Mooney has been good for him as well. Brandon Aubrey, we've talked about carrying him through a lot of games too. Good stuff there. Yeah, so let's move on from that one and talk about, man, I had a stinker of a match this week that we just have to look at. It is
Wet Noodle Fight of the Week.
And there's no doubt about it. 99 points for me and 118 points for Eric, the Stroud boys. They take home the win, but well under the median, so 1-1 for them. And an 0-2 for me in a match I was really hopeful to leap myself into playoff contention. Didn't quite get there. Draker Mayfield, a.k.a. Drake May, 13.7 points. Wasn't his best fantasy performance, but they absolutely crushed the Bears, and he outclassed Caleb Williams in just about every way on the field. It was great to watch just as a Patriots fan and as a fan of the player, so even though he didn't score me a lot of points, I'm not too upset about him. Saquon Barkley, man, it is just brutal. We talked about Jalen Hurts putting up all those points, and it's because Saquon Barkley just runs them all the way down the field to the 1-yard line, and then Jalen Hurts gets the touchdown. So it's not points for Saquon, and that really ends up hurting me quite a bit. I had big hopes for Devon Achane Monday night, too, but he only got 10 points, 5 receptions for 15 yards, 12 carries for 37 yards. Not great efficiency metrics on those. They won that game, so I'm sure he's not at home complaining, but I am, so here we are. Tank Dell, 9.3 points. God, it just seems like there's a lot of missed opportunities continually in these. He seems to always have a high target count and not as high of a reception count. Just want him to catch him on all of those there. The Texans lost that game after leading in the first half. They just kind of fell apart and didn't accomplish anything. Tank Dell scored those points early, and then that was pretty much it for him. Newly acquired Amon-Ra St. Brown for me. I traded with Ricky here. Ended up getting me 19 points. I was really happy to see that because I did just trade for him. So I'm happy that he was worth it there. But yeah, a lot of red looking at the rest of my team. Trey McBride, 11.1. Beat Evan Engram on the week, so I wasn't too upset about that. Demario Douglas was a kind of last-minute second-guess decision for myself, but I ended up not making the wrong decision. I got 9 points out of him, so that wasn't bad. I could have started Jaylen Warren, but he wasn't really who I was thinking about. Really, it was Brian Thomas, who's been amazing this year. With Mac Jones starting, I was doubting it, so I did swap that out, and it did end up being a good choice for me, so I'm happy about that as well. Justin Tucker, though, disappointing on Thursday, missing an extra point, not kicking any field goals, so -2 points that I was just staring at for 3 days. That really, really sucks. And he's been disappointing this year. So that's why his name has been changed. The Chiefs' defense was fine. Ginkelberg was Ginkelberg. Love that. But, everything else pretty disappointing and leading to that sub-100-point finish. Eric didn't really have a high bar to beat, but I couldn't get there regardless here. CJ Stroud, 10.7 points in that Houston game that we were talking about. Breece Hall, has been disappointing in this stretch here, just as the Jets have been disappointing. Only 12.3 points out of him. James Cook was good, beat his projection, 15.5 points there. He scored a touchdown. But Keenan Allen, middle of the road. Jameson Williams, middle of the road. 9.3, 9.4 points out of those guys. 10 out of Evan Ingram. 8 out of Cade Otton. But here's where we get to the damage, and this was just heartbreaking to watch. It was Kaimi Fairbairn kicking all those field goals for the collapsing Texans over and over with the long field goals there, and then the Buffalo defense, who we talked about, Eric, just kind of deciding between the Packers or the Bills or just dropping people, moving them around, ended up settling on the Bills, and Joe Flacco comes out, first play of the game, throws a pick six, and then throws 2 more egregious interceptions in that game. Just on top of allowing 4 sacks. They're not all Joe Flacco, but he was miserable, and he got re-benched by the Colts. They're bringing back Anthony Richardson after benching Anthony Richardson. Everyone posting on Twitter, snip, snap, to Michael Scott gifs. That's what's going on in Indianapolis. So the Buffalo Bills defense scoring 20 was definitely felt like a swift kick in the nuts for me, just watching it over and over. And that ended up making a pretty big difference here, though I can't attribute it all to that. It was a good win for the Stroud boys here, not quite making the median, only going 1-1 and staying even on the season so far at 10-10. Well, I moved down to 8-12 here. Let's talk about our last matchup, a high-profile matchup, one that we are all anticipating, where the women in the kitchen faced off against Perfect Cell. 2 win streaks collide, and only 1 leaves. It was the women in the kitchen prevailing here. Chris scoring 161.6 points to Ricky's 139. They both made their median marks here, though Ricky was actually the 6th place scorer with that 139 score, because of how big of a week it was for a lot of people here. Chris started off the week strong, though so did Ricky, with 40-point performances out of both of their quarterbacks. Derrick Henry got 14 points in that game, continued his touchdown streak. It wasn't his best game on the year, and it was even under his projections, but still, a touchdown and 14 points, you're not like, this guy's useless. Kareem Hunt was better, though, even without the touchdown. He got 7 receptions for 65 yards and 35 on the ground. Joe Mixon has been incredibly consistent when he's on the field. He got a touchdown, 90 all-purpose yards and 2 receptions. Great stuff out of him. Wan'Dale Robinson kept up with Malik Neighbors, managed to keep the pace there. 5 receptions for 51 yards for him, whereas Malik had 6 receptions for 50 yards. But I believe Wan'Dale got credit for a tackle, if I'm not mistaken, this week. I'm not going to click through all the menus to find out, but that's why he got an extra point, because he downed someone after an interception or something like that. We were talking about it when it happened. Pretty funny stuff to see, because we have that defensive scoring. These guys getting those defensive points on broken plays and turnovers. Terry McLaurin, I can't say much about him anymore. He continues to score a ton of points, 16.3 out of him here, 5 receptions for 113 yards. George Kittle has been amazing this year, 14.7. He got another touchdown. Drake London, 18.7. Harrison Butker, 10.6. The Lions defense, 10 points, and even Anal Zone putting in the 7.5. Just an all-around good week out of Chris's guys. Again, they've been really getting hot in the middle of the season here, and they're not stopping. Chris is on a 12-win streak, and looks like a team to be feared here, even for our number 1 position in the standings right now. Ricky taking home that 1-1 win-loss on this one on a 139-point week. And that's just how it goes, man. It's It's tough going against the women in the kitchen right now. He started up Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson. They both scored exactly 9.1. Ricky was talking about sending 2 jets after Chris like he was the Twin Towers, and they got 9.1. I don't think it's possible for them to have scored another .01 unless they threw the ball at all, but they couldn't get closer to 9-11 if they tried, so that's pretty funny stuff. Tyreek Hill is now on Ricky's team. He did end up benching him just because of the injury news and not being sure whether he would play Monday. He did end up playing, scoring his first touchdown since week 1. I'm getting 11.7, so there's like 2 points left on the board there, 2.6, but certainly not enough to make up the ground that Chris had put up there. And he didn't really have much other solutions on his bench either than the guys that he put in. They seem to score just as much here. So, again, tough one for Ricky there, but I'm sure he's not at home crying himself to sleep. He's still 17-3, still in first place, and he's hoping to stay that way. But that does it for last week's matchups here. Let's take a look at just these efficiency numbers again, like we always like to after the score summary. Alex scoring the most points and not leaving much to be desired. Chris had 100% efficiency, which historically has led to a win. The Stroud boys did too, and even though they were the 9th scorer there, it did lead to a win as well. Same for the Dogs too, huh? If you start your best lineup, you have a great chance to win, it turns out. So cool to see that is a continuing trend there. And then, we finally can talk about the standings here. Ricky in first place at 17-3. We have Riley in second at 15-5. Chris with that 12-win streak has moved all the way up to third place, 14-6. We've got Nate in fourth at 12-8, and then Eric in fifth at 10-10. Now here's where things are starting to get really close. We've got Alex and Lehman tied for sixth, though Alex has now taken the spot due to points 4, and he's holding that by a 200-point margin over Lehman. So Lehman's going to have to beat Alex by more than a tie in this year if he wants to place above him in the standings. We've got the Ball Hogs and the Dogs, me and Corey, tied for 8th, technically 8th and 9th. I'm beating him by just about 100 points scored, so I am holding the 8th slot here, and him in 9th. We've got Dylan in 10th at 7-13, so just half a game off of us, and then we've got just a half a game behind that. It's Bill Cosby Sleepers already at 6-14 in 11th place. Mike is not pictured. He's half a game behind that at 5-15 here, which is just really rough stuff to see for him. This little joke where the last place team isn't featured on the standings picture here has just become a cruel prank against Mike, as he spent so many weeks down at the bottom. So I'm sorry about that, buddy, but this was never the intention. Hopefully you can dig yourself out of there, or at least hit a lucky game or two in the toilet bowl, and you're not wearing the poop hat next week here. Speaking of which, I got to take a point away from Lehman. It's not really going to end up mattering. He'll score 119, but I haven't quite done that yet. He didn't send a picture this week. You bum. All right, let's take a look here before we get to next week at the moves, see what kind of trades happened, and if there's anything of note in the waiver wire movement here in our Down to the Wire segment. Let's get right to it.
Down to the Wire.
Okay, I wanted to take a quick peek here down at the moves from last week, because we didn't really talk about it a ton, and just see if there was anything that made any big moves there. I don't think there's anything that ended up being too important. Zaire Franklin, who's been starting for George Droid, is there, but other than that, it's just kind of some defensive moves. We got some more defensive guys. Estime on the bench, Quentin Johnston. So nothing too crazy on that sort of stuff here. Yeah, kicker movement. We've got some backup RB stuff. Yeah, Adam Thielen was added last week and just put in. So that was an interesting choice for sure here. But let's talk about some trades because there were a bunch. This was before the games last week where we had Marvin Harrison go with J.K. Dobbins back to Dylan. I'm not sure if we talked fully about that one or not here. I think we mentioned it in the projection preview, but he's since moved on from him again. He sent him off to Riley for Njoku and Metcalf. That seems to be a good haul for Harrison to get him, and then Harrison moved again instantly to Lehman for CeeDee Lamb. We talked about his situation getting rougher and rougher, so just a lot of toss-ups with some wide receivers, but Njoku also changing hands in that whole exchange there. I personally would say maybe Dylan won that exchange out of everyone, but that's my personal opinion. Let's look at the trade that I did with Ricky. He sent this one to me. It was Amon-Ra St. Brown and Khalil Herbert for Tyreek Hill and Tank Bigsby. I was kind of complaining about the whole Tyreek getting pulled out of practice on Friday, not knowing if I wanted to start him, and I was contemplating who I wanted to move, and he was like, well, I could trade you for him instead, and then you won't have to make that decision. And I was like, I mean, sure, like, I would take Amon-Ra St. Brown. I was like, you sure about this? He's like, yeah, I want to split up my Lions. Thinks that the Lions can just win games without Amon-Ra sometimes, and he doesn't want to have to deal with it. So, yeah, it was a trade that kind of made sense for both of us. I think, I obviously took the deal, so I thought I was getting the better end of it, but it was something that he offered. So if he was here, I'm sure he'd share his insight as well. But I'm happy with the way it went too. Let's see if there was anything else that we skipped over. I don't think so. That was a long time ago there. We must have talked about it by now. So that is just about all of our trades and movement there. Let's get into our projection preview for this week because there is a lot of important games happening and I'd like to get through them here. So without further ado, down over to the projection preview.
Projection preview.
All right, I'm just going to start top down like I normally do here, and that unfortunately does start with my matchup every time here, so sorry if I just end up talking about myself for so long, but that's just the way it's going this time here. It's the Ball Hogs versus Herbert the Pervert here. If I remember correctly, I believe we're starting to get into... Is it rematch season yet? Are we quite getting there? I don't quite remember. I'm going to cheat and check week 1 real quick. No, we're not quite there. It'll be next week. We get in the rematch season here. But we're not quite there yet. It's the first time Mike and I have met this season. This will be the last first for everybody until they've made the full rotation all the way through. This is my first time meeting Mike. I want to take home a win on this one, and I'm still depending on Drake May to do it for me here. I've cut away all the other quarterback chaff. I'm just going Drake May. Love the guy, and I can't wait for him to continue to succeed for the Patriots. Saquon Barkley, he's playing tonight. I really hope he actually gets one of his own touchdowns this time. Just run it in from beyond the 20, dude. That would be good because if you don't do that, you don't get the touchdown. Really frustrating stuff there. We've got Amon-Ra St. Brown versus the Jags. I'm super excited about that matchup. That's been historically good. We've got Devon Achane versus the Raiders. The Raiders have been falling apart, so I'm hoping he turns it up there too. Tank Dell playing Monday night versus Dallas. Dallas has been crumbling as well. A lot of pretty soft matchups for me in there, so I'm excited about those guys. Trey McBride, T. McBee's on bye, so I've got my backup tight end, Taysom Hill, going. I'm hoping it's just one of those patented Taysom Hill pop-off weeks. He actually had, it was like an 80-yard touchdown called back on a either a hold or a man downfield or one. It was kind of like a dumb penalty that wasn't close to the play, but he ran all the way down the field on a like a little dump off pass, and it looked great. The dude's an athlete. Love watching him play. I got Brian Thomas going this week. I'm hoping that maybe Mac Jones gets it together. I don't know. I have some other options. I could start Jerry Jeudy or fire up Pop again here. I'm still weighing my options. It's only Thursday, so who knows what ends up in there. To be honest, I kind of just threw him in there because he was the highest projected, and I like seeing the green bar be bigger during the week, so that's what I got going there. Let's look at Mike's lineup. He's got Sam Darnold still going this week here, even though he's got the questionable tag. I don't really remember seeing all that much about hand injury. Okay, a new addition to the report. Doesn't seem to be serious. Maybe it's something to monitor, but I don't think it's going to stop him from playing. I don't remember there being a big deal about that here. He's got Sam Darnold and Tony Pollard playing in that same game against each other. He must be hoping that is a high-scoring matchup, at least for the sake of his fantasy team here. Travis Etienne has not been reliable so far this year, but he is at least healthy again and someone he could put in the RB slot. So we'll see if it's a Travis Etienne week of old or if it's been the new age unreliable Travis Etienne for him this week here. Zay Flowers in that game, the Ravens versus the Steelers. This is a huge game with a lot of implications both in real life and in fantasy here. So I'm really hoping it's not one of those games where Zay Flowers gets some of those long bombs, because he can do that. Same with Xavier Worthy, another huge matchup between the Chiefs and the Bills. This is what a lot of people are saying could be two of the top contenders in the AFC. And we're getting a little preview of it in November, so that should be an awesome game to watch. Kyle Pitts being fired up for him again. Not much to say about him. He's been Kyle Pitts. He continues to be Kyle Pitts. And if you draft Kyle Pitts, you're playing him. So that is what's happening there. Justin Jefferson, of course, he's going as well in that same game we talked about. You're firing him up every week. And then Jake Elliott tonight and the Baltimore defense. The return of Fred Warner to his lineup as well. I think he had him on the bench for bye a week or two ago or something like that, but he has been solid this year as well. I'm projected to win by a good 10 points so far, but these things fluctuate, and neither of us are projected for all that much here. Looking like a weak matchup, but projections have never been kind to me in the past. Okay, let's take a look now at the sleepers versus the women in the kitchen. We got Tua still going for the Bill Cosby sleepers. Artie is still putting his faith in Tua. He got like 12 points last week. Not great. Definitely wouldn't have stood up to Joe Burrow's performance of last week. And it shows in the projections here. Chris is projected to win by a good, 22 points on this one. And it's not because anybody's missing from either lineup. It's just the fact that, you're looking at Alexander Madison versus Josh Jacobs, or you're looking at Elijah Moore versus Scary Terry. You're looking at... it's just you're looking at a tough matchup. One of the hottest teams in the league right now, and they don't show signs of slowing down. So you're hoping this is the week that they trip and stumble. But for Chris, he's hoping to keep it going here. It's gonna be a lot of tonight with the Philadelphia defense deciding some things there, as well as AJ Brown going. They got a few things in that competitive NFC East division rivalry matchup, including that Scary Terry on that side there. So it's just we're gonna see a lot of scoring tonight, and it's going to move all the way into Monday when we got Joe Mixon going as well for the women in the kitchen. And Chris, we'll see who ends up keeping that one going with the win streak, or if Artie is finally the one to snap it here. Ricky is going against Nate. They've talked about this one being somewhat spooky for both sides. This is one of our higher projected matchups of the week, and Nate is hoping to take another one off of Ricky while he's showing vulnerability. Jamar Chase, another big performance out of him against the Chargers would be something he would welcome, I'm sure. Tyreek Hill getting the start versus Las Vegas. They confirmed that it was a tendon in his hand that's been ripped or ruptured or something, but he's been playing through it. So that's why he's got that questionable tag. Garrett Wilson is, the wide receiver 2 this year so far, even though he's had 4 out of the 10 weeks outside of the top 10 or something. Top 20, I believe, was the stat I looked up earlier. Pretty crazy stuff there. He just has these explosive weeks where he scores 25 to 30 points. That ends up making a huge difference there. He's still got both his Jets starting. Devontae Adams going for him as well. Aaron Jones riding the pine. Malik Neighbors on bye. This is the choice that he's going with. I don't necessarily blame him or anything. This has got to be a get-right game opportunity for the Jets against a beatable Colts defense. Brock Bowers has been good for him, and he's still going to hope for him to be good in that Miami game. Picked up a new kicker this week, and the Houston defense, because he's taken out the San Francisco defense versus the Seahawks, which isn't necessarily the most scary offense out of all of them, but really wants to exploit that Houston defense versus the crumbling Cowboys there. We've got Jared Goff still going for Nate. Rico Dowdle is going to try to dawdle on Monday night versus Houston. That's going to be big for these guys to see the Houston defense versus Rico Dowdle. Maybe Ricky's just trying to get in his head a little bit. And also, Devontae Smith tonight going to be a big part of this matchup as well here. So they're going to be looking out for that. Geez, they got a lot of parts of this Monday night game. Jake Ferguson, Nico Collins. Nate is desperately hoping for the return of Nico Collins and for Nico Collins to be as good as he was at the beginning of the year. Going to have to wait and see on that. Still carrying that questionable tag for now. Ricky is projected to win by about 7 points. It's close, but 140 projected for him and 133 projected for Nate. 140 got to be one of the highest projected totals of the year so far. If it's not the highest, I'm sure Ricky was probably the one who had it before that. All right, let's look at the AZ 69ers versus the Toaster Bats. These guys are tied for 6th place, so there's going to be some separation there to see who is going to take home that spot or even move further up in the standings versus staying the same or moving down here. This has got a lot on the line for the both of them, and Jaden Daniels is going to lead it off again for Alex tonight in that game against the Eagles. Does he have anybody else going? He does. Dallas Goedert is going to be in that one here, as well as Austin Eckler. A lot of action early in this matchup for these guys to start the week off strong. We'll see if they end up happy after tonight's game or if it's a disappointment. They got to look at low points projected and totals for them for the next 3 days there. I can tell you that really does suck. Looking at the Justin Tucker -2 all this week. Really wasn't fun, and it wasn't surprising that I ended up losing after that. But again, enough about me here. We've got Bijan Robinson going against that stout Broncos defense here. And he's also got Cortland Sutton going in that same game. So that's going to be a game that Alex is watching closely. I don't believe that Lehman has any players in that one, but I'm sure he's still going to be interested in the outcome there. Eckler's been great so far. Tucker Kraft has been good when he's been on the field, but he's been injured for a little while, so we'll see if he's as good as he was before as well. Jackson Smith and Jigba, fresh off the bye. He had a pretty big week before it. He's hoping he gets those 2 weeks ago performances out of DeAndre Hopkins and Jackson Smith and Jigba in that late window on Sunday. Sunday night, he's got Chase Brown going. I don't think anyone's got any part of that Monday game, so we will know when Sunday is over what the outcome between these two guys is going to be here, and it's all going to come down to Chase Brown by himself on Sunday night, if it's still close by then. Should be a fun one to watch. I am definitely very personally interested in the outcome of this one, and it would do me a lot of favors if these guys both missed the median this week. So fingers crossed there if you're a Ball Hogs fan. Let's talk about the Dogs versus MHJ Peddler, Dylan himself here. Corey is projected to win by just a point right now. It's incredibly close projections here. Patrick Mahomes and Matt Stafford within half a point of each other in the projections. HIV used needle. Tyjae Spears getting broken back out finally here, getting the start for Dylan. He was so excited about him this offseason, and he's been nothing but disappointing and then injured, but he's back, and Dylan's hoping for an explosion here out of Tyjae Spears. Speaking of someone being back from injury, Nick Chubb getting the nod for the Dogs. He's been getting it the last couple weeks, but he has been struggling. We'll see if he can be the Nick Chubb of old against the debilitated Saints, or if they turn up the heat and bring Chubb to his knees again. We've got DeAndre Swift and J.K. Dobbins staring at each other here. These guys are within a little bit for their projections as well. I'm not looking forward to the Bears' chances against Green Bay, even though they're playing at home, though. That matchup versus the Patriots really just kind of showed how flawed they were, and then they go ahead and fire their OC. We'll see what the new guys got cooked up for DeAndre Swift in this one. Corey also has Jaden Reed in that matchup, so he'll be looking at both sides of the ball there. We also talked about Nick Chubb and the Browns going against the Saints, but we've also got Dylan, who's got Njoku doing the same thing. We'll see which one of them can exploit that defense more here, especially since they traded Marshawn Lattimore out. They're kind of in full sell mode at this point. Sam Laporta going for Corey, George Pickens, these guys are all mainstays for him. No Najee Harris, though. He is riding the pine. And Xavier Legette on bye as well. People have been imploring Corey to start Kirk Cousins over Patrick Mahomes every week, and most weeks that would be correct, but Corey can't do it, and he's playing against the Bills this week, so we'll see if that one ends up being a shootout here. DK Metcalf, freshly acquired for Dylan, getting fired up against San Francisco. Jalen Waddle versus the Raiders is a good matchup on paper. We'll see if the Dolphins can get it together. We've got Ricky Pearsall continuing to go. It's going to be also against that Seahawks. He's invested in both sides of the ball there. Going to have a lot of action in the later window for him, and then that Sunday night game as well. So Corey's got Micah Parsons going on Monday, so that might be the last little bit of scoring that we're waiting for here. It looks like it is. We'll see if Corey can keep it competitive and then bring it home with one of the best defenders in football. All right, we've got the Stroud Boys versus George Droid. There's kind of like somewhat of a rhyming scheme in there. It feels weird coming out of my mouth. Stroud Boys, George Droid. Anyway, we've got Eric versus Riley in this one. Eric is down bad in the projections and not missing anybody there. It's just it's just rough weeks for his guys. It's looking like CJ Stroud's projections getting lower and lower every week. He seems to be showing some flaws that people perhaps didn't see in his rookie season. Breece Hall has been disappointing as well. Only projected 15 there. Keenan Allen is functioning wide receiver 1 after some injuries and moves. Mike Evans is still out. Amari Cooper hasn't been trusted so far yet. Cade Otton also missing with a bye this week too. So that's someone that's been scoring a lot for him. He's firing up Jacoby Myers. He's firing up Jameson Williams. And another week of Keenan Allen here. I already talked about the Bears' chances against the Packers not being favorable in my eyes. But Keenan can get stuff done. He's a vet, and he knows how to get some things done when he needs to there. So we'll see if he can be a big body in the end zone or catch a couple key passes and get that PPR pointage. Riley's team, on the other hand, looking scary here. Jalen Hurts, like we said, white hot there. He's playing tonight. Should try to jump out to an early lead there. Alvin Kamara has been incredibly consistent. He's been very good this year. One of the top running backs in the league. Hoping to get more of that versus Cleveland. Christian McCaffrey finally back. He's still carrying a questionable tag, but he didn't look limited at all in the game that he just played, so should be good to go there. And then Deebo Samuel in that same game as well. He's just hoping that the Niners score a ton of points. CeeDee Lamb, newly acquired for him. He's playing Monday night versus Houston in that same game that we talked about Stroud being in here. So that'll be a big one for these two guys. I know, of course, Riley has the kicker Brandon Aubrey as well. So kind of a little bit of synergy for them. If he's getting the touchdown, then he's getting an extra point. And if CeeDee Lamb isn't scoring, then that means Brandon Aubrey's probably kicking long field goals. So could be making up for it there. Darnell Mooney still getting the nod. I mean, he's a wide receiver 8 like we talked about. Why wouldn't you continue to start him? And then TJ Hawkinson going against the Titans there. Looking to be another strong performance out of Riley. He's projected, like I said, about 30 points more than Eric here. So the clear favorite. 70% chance to win according to Sleeper. We'll see if Eric can pull off an upset here, or if Riley is going to continue his tear and hopefully move from second to first if Ricky drops any games. Let's now go to no one. That is our last matchup for the week. Everybody's Week 11 matchups now have been previewed, and there is a lot at stake here. We haven't fully busted out the playoff bracket yet because there's still a lot to be decided, especially towards the bottom here. A lot of us still competing for that 6th spot. We talked about the Stroud Boys being 10-10, and then 9th place is 8-12. So from 5th to 9th, this is just one game within each other for 2 spots in the playoffs here that they're all competing for. And then these guys are not to be underestimated. We still have a good 4 weeks of football left. So if that is attainable for anyone, it could be attainable for these guys as well. But that will do it for me for the DFL breakdown this week. Still having a ton of fun bringing it to you guys here. And I'm glad that you're able to listen. Thanks so much for coming back and spending a little bit of your week with me going over the Dimmadome and everything that's happening in here. I hope you enjoy that game tonight versus the Commanders and the Eagles. Got a ton of fantasy implications. I'm excited to see it. Hope everyone has fun. Love you guys. Talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to the DFL Breakdown. Tune in next week for more.